Alright, welcome everyone. In this quick tutorial video, I am going to introduce you guys to Adobe Illustrator. So we're going to be moving around and you're going to kind of start to learn just how to navigate through Illustrator. So the first thing that you are going to do is you are going to open up a file that I have posted on the class website. You are going to have to download that file and then you are going to have to open it on the laptop. And I will help you guys do this in class. Once you have double clicked on it, it will open up in Adobe Illustrator. Now, this file was originally created on a Mac computer, and some computers, Macs and PCs, they have different fonts. So if you get this missing font pop up, just go ahead and click close. It's not a big deal. We're not doing anything really with text in this tutorial, so it's okay if the font changes. Basically, it will just take the font that was originally used and it will replace it with the default one on our computer. So this is the file that opens up, and I'm gonna show you guys how to navigate through this. If you have your background here, which is dark gray on mine, if yours is white or if it's a dark gray or lighter gray and you want to change it, I'm going to show you guys how to change that. So we are in our Adobe Illustrator. Remember, these are your artboards, and then this is your workspace. If you come up here to the top and you go to Edit, and you go down to Preferences, and you go over to User Interface, this is how we're going to change the color, the background color of our workspace. So we have four options. We have this really dark gray, we have a medium gray, medium light, and then white. So that's how you can change that. And then you can always match your user interface, the canvas background, or leave it white. So you pretty much have 5 choices really. So this is your dark, medium light, and white. And you can always toggle between here if you want it pure white. I personally like a little darker, so then I know where my workspace is and it's clear to see. So once you kind of have that set up, you're going to click OK. The next things we're going to want to do is we're going to want our tools and our panels set to default, so that way we start off with everything kind of in the original place. So we're going to go up here to Window. You're going to go down to Workspace, and you want to make sure it's set on Essentials Classic. So make sure that's clicked, and you're going to go down and click Reset Essentials Classic. So basically that just resets. It didn't do anything on mine because my tools were already kind of out. So let's say if I mess up some of my tools, okay, I go up to Windows, go to Workspace, and go to Reset Essential Classics. So there's not a big difference between Essentials and Essentials Classic. As you can see, Essentials is a little messier. Essentials Classic is a little bit nicer. So Windows, Essentials Classic kind of cleans it all up. So we want Essentials Classic. So pick your background, set your tools to Essentials Classic, reset. You've got your file open. Now, if you notice, this file has multiple things. How you move about is a couple different ways. You can either use the scroll wheel, on your mouse to move up and down. If you want to move side to side, you would click on the hand tool over here, and this allows you to click and grab and drag around. Or the shortcut to the hand tool, press your space bar and you can move around, and then when you let go of the space bar, the hand disappears. Okay. Another thing is if you push Control and the number 0 at the same time, it will zoom out to fit one artboard, your artboard number 1, or whichever artboard you're working on. So if I'm working on this one, it will zoom in and put that in the center of the screen and fill the screen. Now let's say if I want to see all of my artboards at once. How you do that, press the Control button, and then next to the 0 number, there's the minus sign, and you can zoom out. And then there's the plus sign next to that, and you can zoom in. You do have to press and hold Control while you're doing this. So I'm going to zoom out so we can see everything. and this is our artboard. So we're going to work with each one of these panels and do something a little different to help you guys learn some of the basics in Adobe Illustrator. So over here on the left-hand side, we have our Tools panel. We've talked about this before in class. Now there's a few things about the Tools panel. You'll notice if you hover your mouse over a tool, it should work. Oh, there we go. If you hover your mouse over the tool, you'll notice that the actual name of the tool comes up. So if you're told to use the pen tool, but you can't remember which one is the pen tool, you can hover your mouse over and it will tell you pen tool. Another thing, when you have a tool selected, it is going to be a different color. So depending on which setup you have, so mine's the darker setup. So the background is darker. So as I change tools, you'll notice it kind of highlights those. Now each tool, just about every tool, has its own unique mouse cursor. So the direct selection one looks just like it with the white arrow. We have our magic wand tool, it looks like it. Our lasso tool, our pin tool, our type tool, our line tool. Now you notice the line tool and the rectangle tool look similar. Paintbrush tools. So most of them look different. Some of them will have a crosshairs like this, and that's fine. This is the artboard tool, so it automatically started changing to where if we wanted to add a new artboard, so it labeled your artboards and it's very easy to draw a new artboard. The hand tool has a little hand. So another thing you may notice about the toolbar is in some of the bottom right hand corners, you'll notice this little tiny white arrow. What that little arrow means is it means that underneath this tool, there are other tools hidden. So if you click and hold, all the tools pop up. So we have our type tool, area type tool, type on a path, vertical type, vertical area type tool, vertical type on a path, and touch type tool. So all these different tools that have to do with type. Now normally all the tools do relate to each other. So we have our pen tool, add another anchor point, delete an anchor point, and anchor point tool, which we will go through all of those when you guys are learning the pen tool. An important one has to do with your rectangle tool. If you click and hold the rectangle, you'll notice we have a rectangle, rounded rectangle, ellipse, polygon, star, and flares. So we actually have different shapes. If you want a circle, you would use the ellipse tool. If you want a rectangle or a square, you would use the rectangle tool. Another important thing is if you guys make a mistake, so let's say we draw a rectangle and I did not mean to draw this rectangle, all you have to do is push Control Z to undo. Control Z to undo. It will let you back up a few steps, not a ton. However, it will only let you back up. The furthest it'll let you back up is to where you last saved. So you cannot undo something you did yesterday. Okay, it has to be basically something that you just did recently. Another useful thing with the Tools panel, let's say you're doing an activity where you're using the shape tools a lot. Instead of having to come here and toggle between the different shape tools, pressing and holding, okay, I need the ellipse tool. Okay, now I need to draw a rectangle. So instead of going back and forth, pressing and holding, toggling to create your shapes, what you can do, if you press and hold, you'll notice there's a, press and hold, you notice there's a little arrow on the side here. If you click that, what it does is it extends the tools out into its own box. So now it's very easy for you to toggle between the rectangle tool and the circle tool without having to come through here and change it. Now it did not delete the tools from here, from your toolbar. It just made them a little bit more accessible. So this is really helpful when you're doing like a pen drawing. You can bring your pen tools out, your shapes out, things like that. If, let's say, you're done with the shape tools and you don't really need it anymore, and you want to get rid of this because now it's cluttering your work area, you just click the X and it closes them. Okay? Another thing about the Tools panel that you'll notice over here, we have these little boxes here in colors. I'm going to reset mine to default. So what these are, you have this fill color here, see it says fill X. This solid box here is your fill color. The one in the background, it says stroke. This is your stroke. In Illustrator, stroke is the term used for outline. So this is your outline or stroke color. This is your fill color. If you click on the stroke color in the background, it will now make it the front color, your foreground color, and you can switch it back. If you double click, it will open up your color menu and you can pick any number of colors. So if I set the fill to one color and I click on the stroke and I set it to another color, so now I have this blue and this pink, then what happens when I create a shape, it's going to create it with that fill and that stroke. Now if you notice the stroke on this, the outline is very light pink, and that's because our stroke is set to 1. Anytime you want the outline to be thicker, you would just change the stroke up here. And this is something that we will cover more. Now, if you have a bunch of crazy colors here and you want to reset it to default, this little tiny box of black and white, you click that and it will set it to default. If I come over to the artboard area and I select an object, like let's say I select this circle here, you'll notice that the fill of the circle is yellow and the stroke is orange. The boxes over here will automatically change their colors to show those colors. So every time I change, it goes to the same one. So this can be really helpful if, let's say, I need to create a rectangle with the same colors as this circle, happy face here. I would select that, and then I can come over to my rectangle tool and create a rectangle using the same colors as that circle. One really cool thing that this tells us when we select our object, when we select it and it changes with the fill color and the stroke color, is it lets us know that this is one solid object. Sometimes you'll see that some designers would design the background yellow circle as one object and then the outline as a second object. And that could be done for different reasons about layering and things like that. But when we select this, it tells us that it is one object with a stroke. And so when you move it using the selection tool around, it all moves as one object. So I'm going to push Control Z to undo that, to move it back to where it needs to be. So another thing that we can do with our fill and stroke colors here, if we have an object selected, like this pink circle with this blue stroke, and you'll notice that the fill is pink and the stroke is blue. If you'll notice these little tiny arrows, this is your swap fill and stroke. So what this lets us do is if we click it, it actually swaps. What was your fill is now your stroke, and what is your stroke is now your fill. And it automatically does it with the object that we've selected on our canvas. So we can literally toggle between and select them back and forth. Another thing is if we select the default, it will make it black and white. Now you have to be careful if you don't want to change the object to black and white, then you don't want to have anything selected when you do that. So I'm going to push Control Z to change it back. Now if I unselect, so nothing is selected, and I select my default, it'll go back to black and white without changing anything here. Okay, gotta change him back to pink. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and delete this box here. I'm just going to select it and push the delete button on the keyboard. Another interesting thing about the tools panel, if you guys notice up here at the top, we have this little arrow. These arrows allow us to change our tools to a 2-row column or single column. So it's really up to you guys how you like to work. If you like them kind of bunched together like this, that's fine. If you like it just straight down the side of the screen, it's really up to you, whatever you guys are comfortable with. I usually just work with it in this way because it's just everything's in a row, it's in order. Alright, so that's pretty much the tools panel. Up top here, we have the control panel. Let's change that to default. This control panel basically has a lot of our settings and our important little parts when we're working with tools. So you'll notice as we select certain objects, things change. This tells us our colors. It also tells us how thick the stroke is. So the stroke on this circle is 21 points. That's pretty thick. Usually the default when you are drawing a circle or shape is either 0 or 1. Um, you can also see there's different types of tools. It really just depends on what you're selecting, depends on what changes, like when we select the text, things like that. Another thing you'll notice is this guy right here. This is actually the file you're working on. So it has the name 01 interface introduction.ai. If you grab it, it's just like a window in Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge in the internet. So you can move that around. This allows you to have multiple windows open at the same time. If you click it and drag it right back up, it'll go back there. If you have multiple open, there'll be all tabs here. If you close this tab, it will ask you if you want to save the interface. You should always save your stuff before you guys close it. I haven't done anything, so I'm just clicking no. You'll notice when I click no, it will take me back out because I don't have anything open. So it wants to know what I would like to open, so you just click open. And then once again, that little default thing pops up. Zoom back out. Another thing, if you have multiple open and you close one, you can always go to File, Open Recent, and open up a document that you were just working on. This is a crazy document that I was working on over the summer creating logos. We will be talking more about logos later on. So I'm just going to close that, and you'll notice that one went away, just like a little tab. So I'm going to show you some fun things that the control panel up here, the control board up here can do with your shapes. So if you click on an object, if you click the zoom tool, we can, oops, zoom in. That was a bit far. Just going to Control Z to zoom out a little bit. So you can use the zoom tool to click in on an object that you want to zoom in on. So let's say we zoomed in on this little blue face. I'm going to select him. You'll notice everything up here in the control panel is all your settings for this blue circle. Now you'll notice your fill and stroke color are here. They're also listed up here. What's nice about having them up here is if you click this little down arrow, you can easily change the colors for both in these swatches. So this panel here is called your swatch panel. So you can see we can easily change the colors. We can also change the stroke, make it thick, super thin, go back to thick. The uniform, these are basically the different types of brushes you use. So let's say we use that one, kind of get this cool little crescent. These are also the types of brushes you have to use too. So if I wanted to, I can make it kind of this jaggedy edge. Now you'll notice it defaulted back to 1. So if I come down here, I can go a little crazy. That's a bit much. There you go. You can change the opacity. Opacity is how transparent something is. So, oops. So I can lower the opacity on this. Okay. So you can have a lot of fun with this. So I'm going to use Control Z to undo everything I did. Put him back to what he was. So another thing that we have is our text tool here on the left side. Now when you click on the text tool, you'll notice that some things up here have changed. So we now have our fill and our outline. Most of the time, you will not need any kind of outline on your text because then it makes it to where you can't read it. So when it's a white box like this with a red line through it, that means no outline, no stroke. So of course, stroke is set to 0. Your opacity is once again how transparent it is. Here are your font choices. Oops. So if I click on here and highlight, oh, goodness, highlight that, I can change my fonts. There's quite a few. So I can change it to that. You have regular, let's see, let's just do Times New Roman. So you'll notice there's regular, italic, bold, bold, italic. If a font has more choices, they'll be right here. Every font usually has regular and then some have more. You also have the font size. And then you're under here under paragraphs, it says, is it centered, to the left, to the right, things like that. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. So the next thing we're going to look at is over here on the right hand side, we have some of our panels menus. So I'm going to show them to you, okay? You should basically have these same ones here. This top one is your color panel. Then you have your swatches with your brushes, your stroke, and your layers. Now, inside of each of these, there are some other, so we have our color guide. There's some other tabs. So we have our swatches, brushes, symbols, stroke, gradients, transparency, and you'll also notice that not only do some of these have information here, but if you click on these little arrows right here, it expands it. So there are some sub ones. So if we take a look, let's say we select this guy here, and we're looking at the stroke, it tells us everything we need to know. It tells us the size, the way that it's capped off, the way the corners are. So for instance, if we draw a square, okay, this has pointed corners, 90 degrees, but we can change them to rounded or beveled, which is where it's a cutoff. So we can also make it to where the stroke is in the center, on the outside, or on the inside or on the outside. So by default, it's always the first ones. Now in the layers panel, you'll notice that we have one layer. That means everything on this workspace and artboard is all done in one layer. If we look at our artboards, you'll notice we'll have 4 artboards. So artboards are essentially your pages, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, I'm going to delete this. If we look at our layers panel, you'll notice that there is actually an eye here. This eye allows us to turn all the objects in that layer off or on. The next little one, this is a lock. We can lock this layer, which means we cannot do anything to it. So this is useful if you've created something and you don't want it to be moved, you don't want to touch it, you don't want to accidentally mess it up. You can put it on its own layer and lock that layer. And then you just click the lock to unlock it. If you click the down arrow, it literally will have everything that it's created on here in its own separate little layer. But overall, they're on one layer. How you create a new layer is you click this button to create a new layer, and then this creates a new sublayer within that layer. To delete a layer, you simply grab it and drag it down to the trash, or if you click on it and click trash, it'll delete it. The next thing we're going to look at, by the way, if you click those little arrows, it hides it, so you have a nice clean workspace. The next thing we're going to look at is something down here at the bottom. So down here at the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see there's some little numbers and things here. This first one where it says 150%, that's actually our zoom. So if you click on this little drop-down arrow, you'll notice that it opens up to where we can either zoom out to a certain percentage, we can zoom in. So this is a quick way for you to kind of zoom in and out of a few things. Obviously, it's preset to certain numbers. The next thing here is your artboards. So we have 4 artboards. If you click one, it'll automatically go to that artboard. Or you can click the next or previous to toggle through each artboard. So this is a quick way of zooming in and out and navigating through. Okay, I'm going to zoom out here. Now, I want to show you guys how to open up multiple documents and toggle between your document tabs and actually have more than one on the screen at the same time. So here we have our first document open. Now let's say I want to open up a new document. You go up to File, New. It's going to ask you what kind of document you want to open up. I'm just going to open your standard letter, which is 11 by 8.5. I want it vertical, so this is your orientation. Do you want it vertical or do you want it landscape, which is horizontal? It's also asking you how many artboards you want. I usually just start out with one and then add them, but it's really up to you. So I'm going to click OK. So now you'll see I have my interface introduction document that we're working on and a new untitled document. I'm going to open up one more new untitled document. I'm going to do the same thing. So now I have untitled document 1 and untitled document 2, and they're zoomed in. So you can literally just click on these to toggle between each document. Okay, let's put a square on one. So we'll put a blue square on one, and then we will put on document 2, let's do a pink circle. Okay, just so it's easier to tell. So document 1, document 2, boom. So now let's say we want to have our documents all on the screen at the same time. There's a few things you can do. You can go to Window and you can go down to Arrange. So it will allow us to tile them. So now here we have the first one, Untitled 1 and Untitled 2. If you click on it and do Control 0 on each one, it will open them up full size. So now we have all three open up at the same time. And why this could be helpful is if there's something on, let's say this document, like this face, I'm going to select this face, click and drag it over here. It's going to copy it here. So now I have a face here. So you can then select all of this, click and drag it over here. Okay, so this makes it really easy to move things around. So Window Arrange allows you to do that. So Cascade Tile, you can consolidate all windows, which puts it back to where you can click them. You can float in window, which means that you have to kind of move it around. It's just floating here. This can get a little annoying because if you have one floating and then you click here, sometimes they hide and they get hidden and stuff. So it is nice to have them all up, either up here or tiled. Okay, I'm going to close these. It's going to ask me if I want to save them. This was just me playing around, so I'm going to say no. Make sure you always read these pop-up, guys. So I'm going to go back to our original. So now you remember these are our artboards, and then this is our work area. Some people call it paste board or paste area. I call it your workspace or your work area. Now anything on this document, in this white area, that is your actual design. That is what is saved when you make a PDF file. That is what is printed. Anything extra on the outside, so in this gray area, is extra. It's a great area for you to store images, things like that. So if you'll notice here on this left-hand side, there are the 4 faces, and these are the artworks. And that way, in case we decide, let's say, okay, I don't like this face on this yellow guy, I want to change it to, let's say, this overly enthusiastic happy guy. I'm going to Control C to make a copy, Control V to paste it, so I have an extra one. And I'm going to make it bigger. So let's say, okay, yeah, I like that. Or if you're like, no, I don't like it, I'm going to Control Z, delete, go back to my original face. By doing it this way, by having these extra images kind of hanging out over here and you're just copying and pasting them, it's making it to where you're not deleting any of your work. Because if this was the only copy you had and you just deleted it, then you might have to recreate the whole thing. So sometimes what I'll do is if I decide, I don't know if I like this, I'll move it over here into my paste area, and then I can make a copy of another face and paste that up there. And then you can decide, never mind, I don't like that, undo. So make sure you guys are really careful with what you delete because sometimes you can't undo it. And if you delete it, it might be gone forever. So sometimes it's a great idea for you to just put it over here in your art area, your workspace, because you can fill this thing all up in an image, oops, in a file I had worked on. You'll notice I have all kinds of things in my area. I have color swatches, I have inspiration, I have all kinds of things on the outside to kind of help me with my artwork. That way you don't delete anything. So please be very careful when you guys are deleting stuff because you do have areas to kind of just paste your images. So hopefully this was a good walkthrough for you on introducing you to Illustrator and you had a chance to kind of click around and play with things.